ॐ तत्पुरुषाय विद्महे वक्रतुण्डाय धीमहि तन्नो दन्तिः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ जयन्ती मंगलकाली भद्रकाली कपालिनी दुर्गा क्षमा शिवदात्री स्वाहा स्वदा नमोस्तुते। ॐ शांति शांति शांति। साई राम लेन, साई राम।
Sai Ram Sharma and Sai Ram, loving Sai Ram, to our listeners wherever you may be. Welcome to Sharma's and I humble little program, and we thank Bhagavan for giving us this golden chance to share some more stories of the glory of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai. My topic tonight is prison break, and Swami had great empathy for people who were in prison. And indeed, a number of his devotees are counselors in prisons and do seva, visiting prisoners whom no one else wishes to visit. This often happens in families where a family member is incarcerated and the rest of the family is too embarrassed to take the children or to go visit the family member because they cannot deal with the seriousness or the embarrassment of the crime that the family member has committed. We were in Prashanti Nilayam in 1989. It was Christmas time, and my husband was sitting in darshan when he heard behind him a New Zealand voice. This surprised him because in those days there were not many of us going to India to see Swami, and to hear a distinctive New Zealand accent was very surprising. He turned around and saw a gentleman from Wellington, Major Peter Phipps, who was an army major who had become a counselor with the Salvation Army and much later a prison chaplain in New Zealand. He was a minister in the Christian Episcopal Church, or Anglican Church as it is called, but he had many, many gifts and talents, and he had recently been one of 3 counselors sent to a place called Aramoana in New Zealand. In New Zealand, we do not have many mass shootings at all. This is not part of the culture here because most people do not own guns. It is not a gun culture other than hunters who hunt for food. However, this shooting that happened here was very serious. 14 people were killed, and Major Phipps was one of a team of 3 counselors sent to console the victims. He was in his motel at the location where the crime took place, and he suddenly felt so overwhelmed by what he had to do that he felt all the strength leave his body. He got down on his knees and prayed to his God to please help him. And it was one of those prayers, if you are out there, please help me. He suddenly heard a voice that said, I am greater than you know. Seek me out and find me. It gave him quite a surprise, quite a start, and he suddenly felt a huge rush of power enter his spine. And he suddenly felt confident enough to go to the hospital and even to console and encourage his fellow counselors who also were overwhelmed by the task at hand. Shortly after this incident, he was given a book called The Jesus Mystery. Jesus lived in India. And in that book, there was mention of Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Suddenly, he remembered the voice that he had heard in the motel, I am greater than you know, seek me out and find me. And soon he was on a plane to India and ended up sitting behind my husband. We became all good friends. And when Peter later was appointed the prison chaplain for Rimataka prison in Wellington, he requested me to speak to a female prisoner up here in Auckland. She was the girlfriend of a prisoner that he was counseling in Wellington. No one wanted to visit this girl. She was from a good family, and she had been arrested on serious drug charges. None of the family wanted to visit her, and the inmate in Wellington was begging Peter, could someone please visit his girlfriend? They were both in prison for a very long time. I believe the man had been given 12 years and the woman had been given 8 years. And she was only very young. She was only about 20 years old. So I applied for prison work, prison seva, and was accepted. They do extensive police checks, background checks before I would be allowed to go into the women's prison. And that was quite an ordeal because you are searched, you are scanned, you have to go through a number of security gates. And it is not an enlightening experience. I can tell you it would put off many people, especially being searched. However, I thought, Swami, you have arranged this for me, and let us see what we can do. I was ushered into what is called the family room, and there were little round tables with chairs that were bolted to the floor. Also, the tables were bolted. There were no pictures on the wall, no plants. It was a very bare room, and there were 2 glass cubicles where inmates could visit privately with their families and children. And then the prisoners came in. They were all ladies, anywhere from 18 years old to 50. It was a special unit called the Low Security Unit, and these women had earned the right by coming up from D block, which is the most dangerous prisoners, worked their way up through D, C, B, and A, which is low security, which meant they had achieved a certain amount of trust and were able to have access to the visitors' room. And they were all wearing orange jumpsuits, exactly the same color as Bhagavan's robe. Any misgivings or fears I might have had, and there were few, because already I had complete trust that Swami was behind this, that I felt everyone I was talking to was Swami, because they were wearing bright orange outfits. And I remember sitting down with this girl. She was so happy to have someone to talk to, and she began to describe what life was like in the prison, what it was like when you first arrive, how the other girls gang up on you and try to put you down, call you names, look on your person to see if you are hiding anything, and then you are slowly begin to find your way into the prison system. She said it was very, very uncomfortable. They were only given a thin gray blanket on their bed, and it was very scratchy, very poor quality blanket. It was very thin. It didn't keep you warm, and it made her skin break out with a rash. Of course, there's nothing you can do. You can't say, oh, I will get you a nice blanket. No, you cannot give them any gifts, nothing like that. You can only write. You can only write them letters. This is the only thing, or you can accept a phone call from them if they earn enough good behavior points to have access to the pay phone. And also there was a prison shop that if they earned enough money and they were paid 20 cents an hour, if you can imagine what this would be, let's see, it would be a rupee is worth, I think there's 50 rupees to a New Zealand dollar. So it is just a pittance. You imagine how long you have to work in the prison laundry or in the forklift area to earn enough money to buy something like a chocolate bar or a pack of mints, something like this. This was just what they all wanted. She said some of the girls were so desperate that they would drink the hand sanitizer in the bathroom because it had alcohol in it. And so as a result of that, all the hand sanitizers were removed from the prison. So it is a life of complete deprivation. you are trained to do some kind of work that will give you perhaps a job when you get out, but there was no work available once you have a prison record. And once you are paroled, as you are walking out of the prison, the guards are shouting at you, taunting you, saying you'll be back in 2 weeks, you'll never last outside. So I began to get a picture of how truly horrific it is to be imprisoned. Even in New Zealand, which has quite a good prison system where, the food is not great, but it is certainly inmates get pieces of fruit and they get some green vegetable. I know in other countries this would certainly not even be a possibility. However, once inside, and as Major Phipps told me, there comes a time in every prisoner's life when they will break down and cry and beg for some spiritual enlightenment. He said even the toughest criminals, this will happen, and it will usually be in the middle of the night when they are so lonely, and they cry out, if there's a God, please help me. And she said this, my prisoner friend said this was the same with all of the girls. They began to cry out for some kind of spiritual help because there was no one else to talk to but whatever their idea of God was. So I gave her books on, I was able to talk to her about Swami. I wasn't allowed to send her a book, and of course there were no books about him in the prison library, but I began telling her stories of our trips to India, and of course I was not allowed to give her any information about her boyfriend who was incarcerated 900 miles away. And she did speak about him, that she loved him, that she was hoping once she got out that they could be married. But that was not to be. He was kept in prison much longer than she was, but she did begin her spiritual quest. Once she was hearing about Swami, I was able to write letters to her about him. I was able to enclose a photo of him. And then she began to ask me, were there any Indian women saints that she could read about as well? And so I was able to send her some stories of Amrita, my Ma, and Holy Mother, Ramakrishna's consort, and Amma, the hugging saint. She, being a woman, of course, she was very interested in the fact that Swami looked a little bit like a woman to her. And she said, oh, my goodness, he looks like a queen from Fiji Islands. And I said, no, but sometimes Swami is looking a lot like a woman, more like mother. He was very much like mother and father to me. And I taught her Gayatri Mantra. This is one of the most effective things that a prisoner can learn, because it begins to bring some light into this world of darkness in which they live. I hope you have enjoyed and taken to heart this small story of how Swami inspired prison work. It is a great seva if you can do it. Every prisoner needs someone, and of course they will be in a safe environment. You have nothing to fear. Most of them are quite ordinary people who became in touch with bad men or women who their evilness tarnished them. It rubbed off on them. And also we found here in New Zealand, most of these were turning to crime when they were young children. They were from broken homes. There was no food. There was no money in the house, and many of them had been hungry for most of their life. Swami once said that if there was free water, clean water, free health care, and free education in every country, there would be no crime. He said the biggest cause of crime is poverty. It is poverty that drives most people to commit crimes. Not in every case, of course. And like, for example, in white-collar crime, you have men and women who are greedy for money, and they commit the crimes for acquiring more worldly goods, and their greed knows no end. But the majority of prisoners you will find are really quite ordinary people who had a bad start in life. They might have been mistreated or beaten by violent parents. They might have been put in orphanages or homes as a result of their theft, stealing. That is how most of the young people here in New Zealand end up either in prison by either dealing drugs for money or by stealing. Please take this to heart and consider prison service if it is anywhere within your purview. Several New Zealand devotees are allowed to take their guitars into prisons and teach prisoners how to sing bhajans. Wishing you all the best that life has to offer, and remember, a life of service is a life devoted to God. Om Shri Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. तस्मात् कारुण्य भावेन रक्ष रक्ष साईश्वरा. हरि ओम तत्सत् श्री साईश्वरार्पणमस्तु. ओम शांति शांति शांति.